Horse loses control when seeing girl. The reason will give you chills. During the most anticipated race of the year, an elite horse freezes and flees in front of thousands of people. He gallops toward the stands and surrenders to the silent touch of an unknown young woman. What seemed like a breakdown reveals an ancient bond, capable of exposing secrets, ruining reputations, and changing destinies forever. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us which city you're watching from. We'll continue. I promise this will be the best story you'll ever hear in your life. The morning sun bathed the Oak Ridge Downs racetrack with a golden light that promised a historic day. The stands filled quickly, a sea of elegant hats and colorful dresses contrasting with the palpable tension in the air. It was the Grand Prix of the season, the most prestigious race in the American horse racing calendar, and everyone knew that Black Storm was among the favorites. Behind the scenes, trainer Jack Morgan adjusted the saddle on the horse he had dedicated the last 3 years of his life to preparing for the 10th time. His experienced hands trembled slightly, not from the nervousness of the competition, but from the strange restlessness he perceived in the animal. Black Storm, normally a model of discipline and control, repeatedly shook his head, his nostrils flaring as if capturing something no one else could perceive. "Is everything okay with him, Jack?" asked Ryan Miller, the jockey who would ride the horse. His voice carried a confidence that wasn't completely reflected in his eyes. "He seems different today." Jack ran his hand over the animal's gleaming neck, feeling the tense muscles under the skin. Must be pre-race anxiety. He knows today is special. But deep down, something bothered him. In all his years as a trainer, he had never seen Black Storm display such agitation. The horse was a living legend, their purebred English thoroughbred of impeccable lineage. He had won 17 consecutive victories, breaking records and captivating crowds. His black coat shone like polished obsidian, and his expressive eyes seemed to understand each command even before it was given. For Jack, he represented the culmination of a career dedicated to perfecting the art of training racehorses. "Gentlemen, 5 minutes to start," announced an official, and movement behind the scenes intensified. Handlers ran from one side to another, jockeys made final adjustments to their equipment, and the noise from the crowd grew like an approaching wave. Black Storm began walking in circles, his hooves beating an irregular rhythm against the ground. His eyes scanned the crowd with an urgency that Jack had never witnessed before. It was as if the animal was searching for something specific, someone who should be there but wasn't. "Come on, champion," Jack murmured, trying to convey calm through his voice. "One more victory and you'll definitely go down in history." But Black Storm didn't seem interested in history or victories. His breathing was more accelerated, and he began to softly neigh, a sound that seemed more like a call than an expression of nervousness. The trainer felt a chill down his spine. In 3 decades working with horses, he had learned to read the signs that preceded unexpected behaviors. "It's time," said Ryan, mounting with the grace of someone who had done it thousands of times. "Let's show them why we're the best." The walk to the starting gate was tense. Black Storm resisted commands, stopping suddenly as if listening to something no one else could capture. His head constantly turned toward the stands, where thousands of spectators anxiously awaited the start of the race. "Focus, boy," whispered Ryan, stroking the horse's neck. "It's just another race." But for Black Storm, it clearly wasn't just another race. His eyes continued to scan the crowd, as if searching for a familiar face amid the sea of strangers. His agitation grew with each second, and small tremors ran through his body. The official announcer introduced the competitors, and his voice echoed throughout the track. In gate number 3, the hometown favorite, Black Storm, ridden by Ryan Miller, trained by Jack Morgan. The crowd exploded in applause, but the horse seemed startled by the noise, taking a few steps back. "Easy, easy," tried Jack to calm him, but he realized he was losing control of the situation. The animal he knew like the back of his hand was behaving like a stranger. Television cameras focused on Black Storm, broadcasting his image to millions of homes across the country. Commentators praised his impeccable physical condition and predicted another overwhelming victory. No one suspected the drama unfolding behind the scenes. "Jockeys, prepare yourselves," shouted the starting official. The gates aligned, and a tense silence fell over the racetrack. It was the moment that preceded the explosion of energy that characterized the start of a race. Black Storm was led to his gate, but his resistance increased. He planted his hooves on the ground, refusing to advance. Ryan tried to encourage him with words and gestures, but the horse remained motionless, as if something invisible prevented him from proceeding. "What's happening?" asked one of the handlers, approaching nervously. "He's seeing something we can't see," replied Jack, a note of concern clear in his voice. "Or someone." It was then that Black Storm did something no one expected. He turned his head completely toward the stands and emitted a loud, prolonged neigh that echoed throughout the racetrack. It wasn't a sound of fear or anxiety, but a call, an attempt at communication that cut through the air like a blade. "Ready!" shouted the official, raising the flag. "Attention for the start!" The signal was about to be given when Black Storm did the unthinkable. With a strength that surprised everyone, he freed himself from the restraints that kept him in the gate, completely ignoring Ryan's shouts and the desperate efforts of the handlers to contain him. "Hold him!" shouted Jack, but it was too late. Black Storm had found what he was looking for, his eyes fixed on a specific point in the stands, where a young woman with brown hair and green eyes stood, hands pressed against her chest, tears silently streaming down her face. The horse galloped straight toward her, jumping over the security barriers as if they were insignificant obstacles. The crowd panicked, some screaming, others trying to move away from the animal's path. Security guards ran in all directions, but Black Storm had a clear objective, and nothing would prevent him from reaching it. When he finally stopped in front of the young woman, silence fell over the racetrack. Thousands of people held their breath, expecting the worst. But what happened next defied all expectations. Black Storm lowered his head docilely, like a dog recognizing its owner after a long separation. The young woman extended a trembling hand and touched his muzzle, and the horse closed his eyes, as if he had finally found the peace he was seeking. "I knew you would find me," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. "I knew you wouldn't forget me." The cameras captured every second of that extraordinary moment, broadcasting to the entire world the scene that would forever change the perception of the relationship between humans and animals. Jack observed everything from a distance, trying to comprehend what he had just witnessed. The young woman mounted Black Storm with a naturalness that only years of coexistence could provide. Without a saddle, without reins, only mutual trust and unconditional love. Together, they began to move, not toward the racetrack, but toward the exit of the venue. "Stop them!" shouted someone from management, but the security guards hesitated. There was something in the scene that transcended protocols and regulations. It was as if they were witnessing the reunion of two souls that had been separated against their will. Jack felt his legs weaken. 3 years of intense work, of dreams and expectations, were disappearing before his eyes. But there was something in Black Storm's expression that prevented him from intervening. For the first time since he had known the animal, he saw true happiness in his eyes. The young woman and the horse disappeared through the corridors of the racetrack, leaving behind a stunned crowd and a trainer who began to question everything he thought he knew about the animal he had dedicated his life to preparing. The hours that followed Black Storm's escape were a whirlwind of chaos and confusion. The racetrack was buzzing with activity, with journalists, federation officials, and representatives of sponsors running from one side to another, all trying to understand what had just happened. Jack Morgan found himself at the center of the storm, answering questions he didn't know how to answer, and facing accusations he didn't fully understand. "How do you explain your horse's behavior, Jack?" asked a journalist, pushing a microphone in his direction. "Was this negligence or a training failure?" Jack ran his hand over his face, tired and confused. Black Storm had never shown this type of behavior before. He's a disciplined animal, rigorously trained. I have no idea what led him to act this way. But his explanation didn't satisfy anyone. Thomas Walker, director of the sponsoring team, approached with a face red with anger. "Jack, do you have any idea of the damage this has caused? We lost the most important race of the season. Our image is destroyed. And now we have to explain to investors why our $1-million horse ran off with a stranger." "She's not a stranger," Jack replied, surprising himself with the certainty in his voice. "Black Storm knew her. You saw how he reacted when he found her. It wasn't fear or confusion, it was recognition." "Recognition?" Thomas laughed bitterly. "Jack, you're talking as if the horse were a human being. Animals don't feel nostalgia, they don't make emotional choices. They respond to stimuli and conditioning." But Jack couldn't forget the expression in Black Storm's eyes when he saw the young woman. There was something there that transcended animal instinct. something that spoke of a deeper connection than anything he had ever witnessed in his career. Dr. Henry Watson, the team's veterinarian and Jack's longtime friend, approached with a concerned expression. "Jack, I need to talk to you in private." They moved away from the crowd and found a more secluded corner in the stables. Henry looked around to make sure they weren't being overheard before speaking. "You know I've worked with horses for more than 20 years, right? And I've never seen anything like what happened today. That wasn't erratic behavior or a mental collapse. It was genuine recognition." "But how is that possible?" Jack asked. "Black Storm has been with us for 3 years. We have no record of previous contact with this young woman." "That's what worries me," Henry replied, lowering his voice. "I got some information about the horse's origin. He didn't come directly from a breeder, as we were told. There's a period of time in his history that isn't documented." Jack felt a chill down his spine. "What do you mean?" "I mean that maybe we don't know everything about Black Storm's past, and maybe someone has an interest in keeping certain information secret." Before Jack could respond, they were interrupted by the arrival of a man in an elegant suit, whom neither of them recognized. He was tall, with graying hair and penetrating eyes, and there was something in his presence that conveyed authority. "Mr. Morgan," he asked, extending his hand. "My name is Dr. Michael Reynolds. I'm legal counsel for the Federation. I need to speak with you about today's events." Jack reluctantly shook his hand. "Doctor, I've already explained everything I know to the authorities. Black Storm had never shown this behavior before." "I understand," Dr. Reynolds responded with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "But I'm afraid you may be in a more delicate situation than you imagine. The Federation is considering opening a formal inquiry into the incident. There are issues of civil liability, damage to the sport's image, and of course the question of spectator safety." "Safety?" Jack became agitated. "No one was injured. Black Storm didn't hurt anyone." "This time," Dr. Reynolds responded calmly. "But what if there's a next time? What if other horses start to imitate this behavior? You understand we can't allow this to become a precedent." Henry stepped forward. "With all due respect, Doctor, what happened today was extraordinary. Perhaps we should try to understand what really happened before looking for culprits." Dr. Reynolds completely ignored him, keeping his focus on Jack. "Mr. Morgan, I came here to offer a solution. We know you're a respected professional, and we have no interest in destroying your career. But we need to recover the horse and ensure this doesn't happen again." "Recover?" Jack asked. "Do you know where he is?" "We're investigating," Dr. Reynolds responded evasively. "But in the meantime, we need your full cooperation. Don't talk to the press. Don't speculate about the causes of the incident, and most importantly, don't support any narrative that might romanticize what happened." Jack felt uncomfortable with the man's authoritarian tone. "And if I refuse, then I fear you will face the legal consequences of your actions, or rather the lack of them." Dr. Reynolds adjusted his tie knot. "Think carefully, Mr. Morgan. You have a reputation to protect." After the legal counsel's departure, Jack felt more confused than ever. There was something in the way Dr. Reynolds spoke that deeply disturbed him. It was as if he knew more about the situation than he was willing to reveal. "Henry," he said, "I need to find this young woman. I need to understand what really happened today." "Jack, you heard what that man said. They're watching you." "I don't care," Jack responded with determination. "Black Storm was my responsibility for 3 years. I watched him grow, trained his every movement, every response. And today I saw something in him I had never seen before. Genuine happiness. I can't simply pretend that didn't happen." Henry sighed. "All right, but we have to be careful. If there really is something someone wants to hide, they may try to stop us." They spent the rest of the afternoon making discreet investigations. Henry used his contacts in the Federation to try to trace Black Storm's origin, while Jack spoke with racetrack employees, trying to get information about the young woman. It was one of the security guards who finally gave them a clue. "I've seen her here before," he revealed. "She always came alone, always sat in the same section, always seemed to be looking for something or someone." "How long has this been happening?" Jack asked. "A few months, maybe more. Always very discreet, never caused problems. But today was different. When I saw the horse running toward her, I realized she wasn't surprised. It was as if she was expecting it." This revelation made Jack even more determined to find answers. If the young woman had been coming to the racetrack regularly, looking for Black Storm, then there was definitely a story they didn't know. As evening fell, When the last journalists had finally left, and the racetrack began to regain its usual calm, Jack received an unexpected call. It was a number he didn't recognize, and the voice on the other end of the line was cautious. "Mr. Morgan, you don't know me, but I know you, and I know Black Storm. If you want to understand what really happened today, meet me at the Central Cafe in town tomorrow at 2 in the afternoon. Come alone." "Who are you?" Jack asked, but the line was already dead. That night, Jack could barely sleep. His mind wouldn't stop processing the day's events, from Black Storm's morning agitation to the mysterious phone call. There were pieces of a puzzle scattered around him, and he was determined to put them together, regardless of the consequences. At dawn, he made his decision. He would go to the scheduled meeting, even knowing he might be putting himself in a dangerous situation. Black Storm had been more than a horse to him. He had been a companion, a partner in a journey that now seemed to have many more layers than he had ever imagined. Jack looked out the window and saw the sun rising over the city. Somewhere, Black Storm was running free, finally reunited with someone who knew him in a way that he, Jack, had never been able to know. And as much as that hurt, he knew he needed to discover the truth behind that extraordinary reunion. The Central Cafe was a modest establishment in the heart of the city, frequented mainly by local merchants and retirees who came to read the newspaper and chat. Jack arrived a few minutes before 2 in the afternoon, chose a table at the back of the establishment, and ordered a coffee, trying to control the anxiety growing in his chest. At 2 o'clock sharp, a man of approximately 60 approached his table. He was short, with white hair and calloused hands that betrayed a life of hard work. He wore simple but clean clothes, and his brown eyes had a depth that spoke of much suffering and wisdom. "Mr. Morgan?" he asked, and Jack nodded positively. "My name is Robert Fields. I was the one who called yesterday." Jack extended his hand, which was firmly shaken. "Mr. Fields, thank you for contacting me. I need to understand what happened yesterday." Robert sat down and ordered a coffee from the waiter. For a few moments they sat in silence, each measuring the other. Finally, Robert spoke. "Mr. Morgan, first of all, I want you to know that I have no intention of causing problems for you. I know you're an honest man and that you've always treated the animals under your care well." "Thank you," Jack replied, intrigued. "But how do you know that?" "Because I've been following Black Storm's career since he was sold." Robert paused, as if the word was difficult to pronounce. "And because that young woman you saw yesterday is my daughter." Jack leaned forward. "Your daughter? So she really did know the horse?" Robert sighed deeply. "Know him? Mr. Morgan, she raised him from birth. Black Storm, or Star as she called him, was born on our farm, Hope Farm, 8 years ago." 8 years? Jack made mental calculations quickly. "But the documents I received indicated that Black Storm was 5 years old when he came to us." "The documents lie," Robert replied bitterly. "Or at least they tell only part of the truth." Jack felt a knot in his stomach. "Tell me everything." Robert took a sip of coffee, as if he needed courage to continue. "My family always raised horses. They weren't race horses, just horses for farm work and some for riding. But when my wife got sick, we needed to sell most of the animals to pay for treatments." "I'm sorry," Jack said sincerely. "Thank you. It was a very difficult time. But we managed to keep a few horses, including a pregnant mare that gave birth to a magnificent colt, black as night, but with eyes that seemed to understand everything. My daughter Emily fell in love with him from the first moment." "Emily?" Jack repeated the name, finally putting a face to the name of the young woman. "She was 15 at the time and spent hours with the colt, teaching tricks, talking to him, even sleeping in the stable sometimes. I never saw such a strong connection between a person and an animal." Robert stopped to wipe his eyes, which had filled with tears. "When my wife passed away, I was completely lost. I drank too much, couldn't take care of the farm properly. That's when a man appeared offering to buy some of our horses. He said he represented a breeder interested in developing a line of race horses." "He bought Black Storm?" Jack asked. "Not immediately. First, he observed the horses for weeks, saw the way Star moved, his intelligence, his lineage, and mainly he saw how Emily had trained him, even without technical knowledge. The horse obeyed her commands with an impressive naturalness." Jack began to understand where the story was leading. "And then? Then he made an offer I couldn't refuse, not just for Star, but for several horses. He said they would have a better life, that they would be well cared for, that they could develop their full potential. And Emily. Emily was devastated. She tried to convince me not to sell, cried, begged, but I needed the money to save the farm. I thought I was doing what was best for everyone. Robert paused, his voice breaking. I never forgave myself for that. Jack leaned back in his chair, processing the information. So Emily has been looking for Black Storm ever since? Ever since, Robert confirmed. She researched, investigated, followed leads. She discovered he had become a racehorse, that he was winning competitions. She started frequenting racetracks, always waiting for an opportunity to see him again. Why didn't she ever approach me? Why didn't she explain the situation? Robert laughed bitterly. Try to explain what? That a young woman without resources was claiming a horse worth millions. That she had an emotional connection with an animal that now belonged to powerful people. Who would believe her? Jack knew Robert was right. In the racing world, horses were investments, not companions. The idea of a rural young woman claiming a champion horse would be seen as ridiculous or worse, as an attempted scam. So she decided to wait, Jack said, more to himself than to Robert. She believed that one day he would recognize her, that the connection between them was too strong to be broken by separation. And yesterday, she was proven right. Jack remembered Black Storm's expression when he saw Emily. It wasn't just recognition. It was relief, as if a part of himself that had been lost had finally been found. Where are they now? Jack asked. Robert hesitated. I'm not sure if I should say. There are powerful people looking for them, and Emily is afraid. Mr. Fields, I don't want to hurt them, but I need to understand the whole truth. There are things happening that I don't fully understand. Robert studied him for a long moment, as if trying to read his soul. Finally, he sighed and made a decision. There's an abandoned farm on the outskirts of the city, St. Joseph's Farm. Emily is there with Star, trying to decide what to do. Can I go there? You can. But Mr. Morgan, you need to understand that to my daughter, you're the man who trained her horse for races he never wanted to run. She won't welcome you with open arms. Jack accepted the condition. I understand, but I need to at least try. Robert wrote directions to the abandoned farm on a napkin. Go at dusk, and go alone. Emily is very distrustful, and any sign that you've brought other people will make her disappear again. Thank you, Mr. Fields, for telling me the truth. Robert stood up to leave, but before going he turned to Jack. Mr. Morgan, you seem to be a good man, but the world of horse racing is not a place for good people. Be careful who you trust. Jack spent the rest of the afternoon thinking about the conversation. Everything made sense now. Black Storm's agitation, his refusal to race, the way he searched for Emily in the crowd. He wasn't having a mental breakdown. He was looking for his family. At 5 in the afternoon, Jack got in his car and drove to the abandoned farm. The place was about 20 miles from the city, on a dirt road that wound between hills covered in pasture. St. Joseph's Farm had once been prosperous, but now it was in ruins, with broken fences and deteriorated buildings. Jack parked his car and walked carefully toward what remained of the main stable. It was then that he heard a familiar neigh that made his heart race. It was Black Storm, or rather Star, as Emily called him. He went around the stable and saw a scene that touched him deeply. Emily was sitting on the grass, leaning against the horse's flank, which was lying beside her. She was caressing his neck while whispering words that Jack couldn't hear. It was an image of peace and harmony that contrasted drastically with the environment of competition and pressure he had associated with the animal. You must be Jack Morgan, Emily said without raising her eyes. Dad said you would come. Hello, Emily, Jack replied, maintaining a respectful distance. Thank you for allowing me to come here. I didn't allow anything, she replied, finally looking at him. But Star wants you to stay. I can see it in his eyes. Jack approached slowly, and to his surprise, Black Storm raised his head and greeted him with a soft neigh. It was different from any sound he had heard from the horse before, more intimate, warmer. He was always like this, Emily said, observing the interaction. Always knew who really cared about him. You care, don't you? More than I imagined, Jack admitted. For the last 3 years, I thought I was giving him everything he needed. Training, veterinary care, competitions where he could show his excellence. But you never gave him freedom, Emily said softly. Never gave him the chance to choose. Jack sat on the grass a few yards away. You're right. In the racing world, horses don't make choices. They respond to commands, follow routines, compete, because that's what they've been trained for. But Star was always different, Emily continued. Even when he was small, he made his own decisions, decided when he wanted to run, when he wanted to rest, when he wanted company. Dad didn't understand, but I understood. Why didn't you try to get him back before? Jack asked. Emily laughed, but without humor. Do you know how much a horse like Star is worth? How much a legal battle against powerful people costs? We didn't have the resources for that. So I waited and prayed, and believed that one day he would find a way to come back to me. And he found it, Jack said, admiring the young woman's determination. He found it, but now I don't know what to do. He can't go back to racing, not after what happened, but I also can't keep him here indefinitely. I don't have the structure for that. Jack realized he had reached the crucial moment in the conversation. Emily, what if there was a third option? She looked at him with curiosity. What kind of option? What if we could create a place where Star could be free but also safe? Where he could make his own choices, but still receive the care he needs? Emily considered the proposal. You would do that? Give up your career to help a horse that chose to run away? It wouldn't be giving up my career, Jack replied. It would be redefining what my career means. In the last 3 years, I've learned a lot about training and competition, but yesterday I learned something much more important about connection and understanding. Emily stood up and approached Jack, Black Storm following her like a faithful shadow. Mr. Morgan, if you're serious, then maybe we can find a solution that works for everyone. I'm serious, Jack replied, looking into the eyes of the horse that had changed his life, more serious than ever. The sun was beginning to set behind the hills, painting the sky in golden and orange hues. Black Storm raised his head and observed the horizon, as if he were seeing possibilities that hadn't existed before. For the first time in months, Jack felt he was on the right path. The days that followed the meeting at the abandoned farm were the most challenging of Jack Morgan's career. He had returned to the city with a new understanding about Black Storm, but also with the awareness that he would face a battle against forces much larger than he had imagined. The pressure began the following morning. Thomas Walker, the director of the sponsoring team, called an emergency meeting with everyone involved in the case. The room was filled with executives, lawyers, and Federation representatives, all with grave expressions that didn't bode well. Jack, Thomas began, his voice cold and professional, we've received information that you had contact with the person who kidnapped our horse. Is this true? She didn't kidnap anyone, Jack responded calmly. Black Storm went to her of his own free will. Horses don't have free will, interrupted Dr. Reynolds, the legal counsel. They respond to stimuli. The question is, what kind of stimulus did this person use to attract the animal? Jack felt irritated by the implication. Doctor, if you had seen what I saw, you would understand that there was no manipulation whatsoever. There was recognition, emotional connection. Emotional connection? Thomas laughed disdainfully. Jack, you're talking like a romantic, not a professional. This horse represents an investment of millions of dollars. We can't allow sentimentality to affect commercial decisions. Perhaps it's time to question whether these commercial decisions are the right ones, Jack replied, surprising everyone with his frankness. The silence that followed was tense. Dr. Reynolds leaned forward. Mr. Morgan, I hope you understand the gravity of the situation. We have contracts to fulfill, sponsors to satisfy, and a reputation to maintain. If you're not willing to collaborate with us, we'll have to take more drastic measures. What kind of measures? Jack asked. We can start with a temporary suspension of your activities while we investigate your professional conduct. Then, depending on the results, we can move on to more serious legal issues. Jack realized he was being pressured to choose between his career and what he knew was right. And if I cooperate, what will happen to Black Storm? He will be recovered and resume his training schedule, Thomas replied. We'll increase security measures to ensure that incidents like this don't happen again. And the young woman? She will be prosecuted for theft and disturbing the public peace. She will serve as an example for others who might have similar ideas. Jack felt his stomach turn. The idea of Emily being prosecuted for trying to reunite with a horse she had raised and loved was absurd and cruel. I need time to think, he finally said. You have until tomorrow, Dr. Reynolds replied. After that, we'll take our own measures. Jack left the meeting feeling pressured and confused. He had dedicated decades of his life to the racing world, built a solid and respected reputation. But now, for the first time, he questioned whether that world truly represented his values. That afternoon, he decided to visit Emily again. He found her in the same place, sitting next to Blackstorm, but this time she wasn't alone. Her father, Robert, was there, and there was a deep sadness in his eyes. "Mr. Morgan," Robert said when he saw him approach, "we received a visit today. Men in suits, lawyers. They said Emily has 24 hours to return the horse or she'll be arrested." Jack knelt beside Emily, who was silently crying. "I'm sorry. I tried to argue with them, but—" "It's not your fault," Emily interrupted, looking at him through her tears. "I always knew this day would come. I can't fight against such powerful people." "Maybe you don't have to fight alone," Jack said softly. Emily looked at him with curiosity. "What do you mean?" Jack took a deep breath, knowing he was about to make the most important decision of his life. "I'm resigning from my position. I'm breaking my contract with the team." "No!" Emily exclaimed. "You can't do that because of me. Your career is too important." "My career has always been about working with horses," Jack replied, "about understanding their needs, developing their potential, creating a partnership based on trust and respect. In the last 3 years, I lost sight of that. I turned Blackstorm into a winning machine, not a partner." Robert approached. "Mr. Morgan, that's very generous, but how would it help? They can still prosecute Emily and you would lose everything." "I wouldn't lose everything," Jack replied. "I would gain something much more valuable, the chance to work with horses in the right way." He turned to Emily. "You mentioned that you don't have the structure to care for Blackstorm long term. What if we created that structure together?" "How?" Emily asked. "I have some savings. We could rent a property, create a sanctuary for retired racehorses, horses that were injured, that are too old to compete, or that simply don't want to race anymore." The idea took shape as he spoke. "We could offer a place where they can live in peace, where their emotional needs are respected, where they can make choices." Emily stood up, her eyes shining with possibility. "You would really do that?" "More than that," Jack continued. "We could document our work, show that there's a different way to relate to horses. Maybe we can change people's mindset about what it means to care for these animals." Robert observed the conversation with a thoughtful expression. "Mr. Morgan, that's a beautiful dream, but facing the system isn't easy. These people have resources, power, influence." "But we have something they don't have," Jack replied, looking at Blackstorm. "We have the truth on our side, and we have proof that horses are much more than racing machines." Emily approached Blackstorm and rested her head on his neck. "Star, what do you think? Do you want to try?" The horse neighed softly, as if answering the question. It was a sound of contentment, of approval. "Then it's decided," Jack said. "We'll create the Hope Sanctuary, a place where horses can simply be horses." The preparations began immediately. Jack used his contacts to find a suitable property, a location with ample pastures, well-ventilated stables, and enough space for horses to move freely. Emily contributed her intimate knowledge of equine behavior, and Robert offered his experience in rural management. The Federation's response was quick and furious. They filed a lawsuit to recover Blackstorm, alleging theft and destruction of property. But Jack had prepared for this, hiring a lawyer specialized in animal rights. "They'll have to prove that Blackstorm was stolen," explained the lawyer, Ms. Sarah Anderson. "But the images from the racetrack clearly show that he went to Emily of his own accord. Additionally, we can argue that the conditions of his original sale were questionable." The case became a media sensation. Videos of the moment when Blackstorm ran to Emily spread across social media, generating a national debate about animal rights and the ethics of horse racing. Supporters began to emerge from all corners: veterinarians, retired trainers, animal rights activists, and even some horse owners spoke out in favor of the sanctuary. Dr. Henry Watson, the veterinarian who had been Jack's friend, was one of the first to join the project. "Jack was always one of the best trainers I knew," he declared in an interview. "If he says this horse chose a new life, I believe him." But the pressure also increased. Thomas Walker used his influence to try to block funding for the sanctuary, and Dr. Reynolds intensified the legal threats. There were moments when Jack doubted whether he had made the right decision. It was during one of these crises of confidence that Emily found him at the sanctuary, observing Blackstorm galloping freely through the pastures. "Are you regretting it?" she asked. "Sometimes," Jack admitted. "Sometimes I think about how much easier it would have been if I had simply returned the horse." "But you know you couldn't do that," Emily said softly. "You saw what I saw. You saw the happiness in his eyes when he realized he could choose. Jack observed the horse, which had stopped galloping and was now grazing peacefully under the afternoon sun. You're right. He was never more beautiful than now, running because he wants to run, not because he has to run. And we were never more needed, Emily added. Look how many horses have already arrived here. How many have found peace after years of forced competition? It was true. In just 2 months, the Hope Sanctuary had received 15 horses. Some were retired veterans of the races. Others had been injured and abandoned by their owners. All had found a second chance at life in the sanctuary. The judicial decision finally came 6 months later. The judge, after analyzing all the evidence, including testimony from animal behavior experts, decided that Black Storm should remain at the sanctuary. This case forces us to rethink our relationship with animals, he declared in his ruling. We can no longer ignore the evidence that horses are sentient beings, capable of forming deep emotional bonds and making meaningful choices. The victory was celebrated across the country. The Hope Sanctuary became a model for other similar projects, and Jack was invited to give lectures on alternative methods of equine training. But the most significant moment came one afternoon, 2 years later, when Jack was observing Emily working with a new horse that had arrived, traumatized and distrustful. She moved with a patience and sensitivity he had never seen in decades of professional work. You know, he said when she approached, I always thought I knew everything about horses, but you taught me that knowing about horses is different from knowing horses. Emily smiled. You taught me a lot too. You showed that it's possible to make a difference, even when it seems impossible. Black Storm approached the two, his movement graceful and carefree. He had gained a little weight since arriving at the sanctuary, and there was a serenity in his eyes that Jack had never seen during the years of competition. Do you regret it? Jack asked the horse, stroking his neck. Do you miss the races, the trophies, the glory? Black Storm just looked at him with those deep, intelligent eyes, then moved away to join the other horses grazing freely in the fields. His answer was in each relaxed step, in each movement that had no purpose beyond the joy of moving itself. I think he answered, Emily said, laughing. Jack agreed. I think so. The sun was setting behind the hills, painting the sky in golden hues. In the field, 15 horses grazed in peace, each with its own story of suffering and redemption, and in the center of them, Black Storm raised his head and neighed softly, a sound that echoed across the property like a hymn of freedom. Jack knew he had found his true calling. It wasn't training horses to win races, but helping them find their own form of happiness. And in that moment, watching the sunset over the sanctuary they had built together, he knew he had never been more fulfilled in his life. The end. Dear listeners, we hope that the story of Jack, Emily, and Black Storm has touched your hearts as much as it touched ours. This narrative reminds us that sometimes the greatest victories don't come from trophies or recognition, but from the courage to do what is right, even when the whole world seems to be against us. If you were moved by this journey of love, sacrifice, and redemption, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and leave a like on this video. Your comments are precious to us. Tell us which part of the story impacted you the most. Every week we bring unique stories that explore the mysteries of the human and animal soul. Don't miss our next content, as we have prepared even more engaging narratives that will make you reflect on the true values of life. Until the next story, and remember, sometimes true freedom is in choosing love instead of obligation.